name is Markus Oppolzer. I'm an associate professor for English literary studies, but also teaching English as a foreign language. My main research areas are autobiography, comics, and picture books. And I usually try to approach these texts from two different points of view or perspectives. One is literary studies, and the other one is how these texts can be used in the classroom. And we've tried together with students to use picture books in the lower secondary, in the Neue Mittelschule, for different purposes. This is a bit of a challenge because they're at level A2, so you have to provide lots of help and scaffolding, but there are quite a lot of things you can do with these texts. One of them is, for example, Ali's story, which is about migration. There is The Island, which is also about migration to a certain extent and racism. Those Shoes is a book about sneakers and expensive clothes and people who can afford it and people who can't. And Mr. Tiger Goes Wild, which is, as you can see, about Victorian culture and this tiger who doesn't really fit in. It's about rules, and so students talk about rules at school and at home, for example. Our approach to in the teacher training program is the reflective model, I would say. And the reflective model means that students are exposed to different types of research, different expertise, people working in fields like more empirical research, actual teachers who teach out there. In my case, it's literary studies and cultural studies. The idea is that they get different perspectives on teaching, and they have to figure out how these pieces of the puzzle work together, how they can relate these ideas to each other and come up with their own approach and ideas of what teaching involves and how it works. My particular contribution is more in the area of content and asking questions, especially coming from cultural studies, because most documents like the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, but also national curricula in the area of general education, they are very much focused on language skills. And in general education schools, we don't even have a separate curriculum for English. So it's very general. It's mostly about language skills, as I said. So I feel you always need something to talk about. So what I try to do is introduce literary texts or cultural studies texts that are all relevant and use that as a starting point, but also something to talk about. And sometimes teachers feel that there's not enough time to discuss literature in the classroom, but if you combine these two things, language activities based on literary text, for example, you can have both, I think. And that would be a way to have more literary texts in the classroom again. I usually combine these two. I think there's no way to separate these two very clearly. So automatically, what you're interested in terms of your research plays a role in your teaching, in courses at university, and the other way around. So you may discover interesting texts while you're teaching because students confront you with new ideas and new texts. So this also has an impact on the kind of research that you do. So these two cannot be separated. Yes, a recent example is gender studies. And I'm not really an expert in gender studies, but it's very important to what I'm doing. So in cultural studies, you automatically reach a point where you talk about gender. And I try to do that by introducing sort of modules in previous courses, like when I talk about identities, then I have a meeting on gender. And I discuss that with students, I try out texts. So this is one thing where I test approaches and ways of working with this field of gender studies with students, but there's also research. So recently I got a chance to write an article on Alex and Ada, which is a comic by Jonathan Luna and Sarah Vaughan. And it's basically an android love story. So you have a male human and a female robot or android. And the way that the main protagonist is presented in this comic is very different to previous narratives, so this cyborg cinema or cyborg narratives. And I thought that there were also parallels to Spike Jonze's Her and also Alexis Garland's Ex Machina. These men are very thoughtful, very sensitive, they're shown in the domestic sphere, And their interaction with these female robots or programs is very interesting. And usually it starts out traditionally where these female entities, robots, women, are at a disadvantage. Their technology, they're owned by big companies. But this Turing test, which is usually about the humans figuring out if these machines can pretend to be like humans or real humans, and this shifts. So it's more about these male characters who are tested in terms of their humanity, in terms of their masculinity, and the power play becomes more interesting, I would say, in these narratives than in other texts. And you discover new interesting theories, you read books, you find primary sources. So I discovered a short story by Esther Delvey called Hell Molloy from the 1930s, and there, through this diachronic perspective, you have again a very different point of view on gender roles. And the idea is that then I use these texts that I collect in courses and see how this works and what you can do with that in the classroom.